Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today, I've got Dave Linthicum, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about um, uh, Agent AI fundamentals. What is it? What does it mean? What can it do for you? All of these things. Before we dive in, David, where can people find you?
Yeah, I got two YouTube channels, a Cloud Computing Insider. I'm at about 250,000 subscribers out there. Also a new YouTube channel called David's Not AI. I'm pushing about 50,000 subscribers. Check my stuff out on LinkedIn. I also have 17 books out, including a book on cloud computing governance that just dropped yesterday.
And it's interesting because I found you because I did your course on LinkedIn, and I thought this is just excellent. And because of that, I was out there learning stuff about AI. So I reached out to you and said, you've got to come on and come on my podcast and talk about this. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Agentic AI, for people out there like me that doesn't know anything about it, can you define it and explain to us what it actually means?
Yeah, it's the ability for AI to operate in autonomous ways. And so, in other words, we're able to create agents, which are just really pieces of software. Everybody is scared of what an agent is. We've been building them for years. I used to build them in the 80s. And so, the unique thing about that is it has a particular persona and a particular purpose. And it's able to work with many other agents that have other personas and other purposes to carry out any number of business activities. So, the idea is I can have one agent that's in charge of marketing, one agent that's in charge of accounting, one agent that's in charge of inventory control, another one in charge of logistics. And I can arm them with their little small language models where they're able to learn, understand, and communicate with the other agents. I can also give them goals and objectives to carry out certain operations. And so, like a person, they have rules and responsibilities. They also have restrictions on what they can do. And they're able to work together as a collection of agents to carry out any number of business problems. And the unique thing about that is they're making independent decisions and they're learning on their own. And so the theory is if that you over a series of years, they should get smarter and smarter and smarter, and the ability to build better businesses. At least that's the idea.
And what's the differences between agentic AI and generative AI, which probably people are more familiar with?
Yeah, and it's confusing. The marketing out there is crazy in terms of how they're redefining it. So you got to remember, agentic AI can use generative AI. And so a generative AI small language model can be part of an agent. And also agents can use large language models. In fact, large language models can become agents. I can wrap them, as autonomous units of software that can operate that way. So agentic AI at the end of the day is really a deployment architecture. In other words, it's the way in which we're doing AI in a different way, distributing systems out, separate them, making them autonomous in different components, and they're able to carry out basically the same sort of operations and the same sort of objective as generative AI. Generative AI is a form of machine learning, and the reason it got very interesting in 2022 when ChatGPT came out is not that it had that many additional capabilities, but we had the ability to make it more useful. In other words, we can have it write letters, we can have it write books, we can have it write articles, we can have it generate invoices, we can have it look at massive amounts of data and make determinations around the data, do predictive analytics, things like that. And it puts it in the hands, since it's a natural language model, into the hands of the humans that know how to use it. So everybody got excited about it, not because it was, huge amounts of differences in the power of AI, but suddenly we had the ability to communicate, chat with it, and it had the ability to carry out certain operations, including generate purpose-built information. I can generate reports. I can write a song about myself. I can create a video. I can create an image. And so that's kind of the magic of it. And so OpenAI and all the researchers that got up to generative AI, it was a huge breakthrough. Agentic, not as much. Agentic basically was an old form of deploying AI models. People have been using it for a long period of time. They put some more methodologies and disciplines and definitions around it. And suddenly when generative AI hit, when generative AI hit a few years later, many of the companies thought they missed the boat on AI. And so when agentic showed up, it was a parade that everybody jumped in front of and created. I've never seen marketing blasts out there like anything else in my career than the amount of noise around the agentic AI stuff. And it's causing some confusion, but it's a powerful technology, but you have to know when to use it and how to use it.
We've had a question from the audience, which I will actually come to next. In your course, you talk about agent architectures and decision-making frameworks. Can you explain how these actually enable AI to act autonomously?
Sure. Decision-making frameworks would be the ability to leverage AI, typically a small language model or a large language model, to make purposeful, predetermined decisions in terms of how to carry out an operation. For example, an inventory control agent knows that it needs to maximize the amount of inventory available to be available for sales, but if it maximizes them too much, it's going to overbuy the inventory. It's going to cost the company money. And so we put together a decision framework and train the agent on what is optimal inventory, how to get to optimal inventory, and the 150 plus rules that you have to follow to get to that particular state. And that goes into the small language model that's innate to the agent, or it may be even a large language model that's external to the agent. But the agent has goals and objectives. In other words, it carries out, you know, remember iRobot with Isaac Asimov. In other words, they have certain goals and objectives, very similar things, where it has rules for the road in terms of how it's going to do its job. And we put a command in there that you need to minimize inventory costs, but you need to maximize inventory availability. And that's true that I actually wrote an agent that did that. And then it has to take these things out and figure out the best way to do that. And we do give it training in terms of how to remove inventory and put inventory in it. But eventually it becomes to figure things out itself. It makes decisions on its own, like you and I do every day when we, you know, navigate life. Yep. And it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. It's able to take the outcomes, able to try different things, able to work with other agents, able to, leverage AI as a force multiplier for its duties, and just carry out any number of things around the decision framework that we've given it. But it's a very narrow thing. You got to remember these agents are not very helpful if we consider them mass complex things. We can't make an ERP system an agent. They do very narrow tasks. They carry out a very narrow set of functions, and they make very narrowly defined decisions, but they're able to do that, hopefully, once they're able to learn over a few years, better than anybody out there, and certainly than any human. At least that's the idea. And then they're able to work with other agents, very much like a company, and that's the way I explain it in my class, where they carry out particular roles. And if they function together as a multi-agent system, they're able to carry out any number of things, and they're able to improve each other by working together on running a company or doing whatever things they need to do.
I want to come back to multi-agents in a moment, but we've had this question here from David Lentz that basically says, the question I have is how your AI automation running? Is it on servers in the cloud? Do you ever need resilience and redundancy, or are these mini AI automations?
David, that's an excellent question. And the reality is they can run anywhere, and that's the power of them. An agent system I built many years ago, it had agents that operated on oil derricks that were running all over South America because they had a limited number of bandwidth to get information back to a centralized computer. And so it ran on a little computer PC, in essence, that was sitting next to each one of the derricks. 2,000 of them ran. So basically you can run them anywhere in any kind of a cluster that you need. And that's the beauty of them. So they're autonomous, so they can be distributed. They're communicating together, usually with the network. So they have to have network connectivity back to them. And I can run them on my watch. At least Apple Intelligence should have been there 6 months ago, never showed up. I can run on my phone. I can run on my Mac. I can run it on my mainframe. I can run it on my LAMP-based computer. I can run it on anything that has a processor, storage, and is able to, carry out certain tasks and operations. So that's the beauty of it. You're able to create an agentic system that's able to mesh within a company, all over the company, and is going to exist next to the systems where it can do the best good. So normally I'm going to put agents, like we said, the aforementioned inventory agent. I'm going to put that nearer to the inventory warehouse where it's able to communicate better to those environments. I'm going to put the other agents in other geographic locations because it's able to better carry things out. Your reliability question, given the fact that the whole internet blew up and twice last couple of weeks, you have to set them up if they're very important and they're bet to business kinds of systems, like any other system that's out there. You have to set them up with dual redundancy. You have to have reliability and failover capabilities, which is a bit more complex with agents, but it can be done. In many cases, people are building agentic AI systems. It's not going to cost the business that much if it's down for a few days, so they can take less of an expensive approach. But if people are doing this thing where our agents, if their agentic system stops running, it's going to be $10,000 an hour, and that's real money that businesses are losing. Then it does make sense for us to create a redundant system that's able to take over as the other agents take over. In some instances, I can have like an inventory agents that we just described. I can have it running near the inventory system. I can have it running on a remote, hardened data center. And that is able to take over if the initial inventory agent is brought down for some reason, or it's, leveraging a cloud provider, and that cloud provider takes a dirt nap, like happened last week, and I'm able to fail over to other systems that are hopefully more reliable.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. And to going back to the multi-agent systems, multi-agent, multi-autonomous agents working together, how close are we seeing this collaboration in scale in industries like robotics or finance?
Not a lot. I think that's the honest answer. I think that the marketing out there and the hype that's around agentic AI and the consulting firms that are out there beating their chest and the fact they have 12,000 agents in production, things like that. Most enterprises who are going to consume this stuff have taken baby steps toward the agentic stuff. Well, most of the stuff I see these days are going to be very unimpressive, very simple systems that are carrying out narrow operations that they got built as a prototype, in a couple of months. And they're running fine, but there's nothing game changing out there in terms of our ability to leverage agents as a true force agentic AI is a true force multiplier for the business. And I think that's the way we always adopt technology. If you remember the adoption of cloud 15 years ago, everybody thought there was a huge party going on and we weren't invited. But the reality is the enterprises had a slow incremental adoption of it over time and made very careful steps because a couple of things. Number one, they don't like risk. And number two, they don't have that much money. So you can't just generate money to invest in these new technologies, including cloud and agentic AI. They're willing to move after it, but they're going to do so in an incremental pace. So there's a huge gap between what we're seeing out there in terms of how the industry is hyping it right now and the marketing dollars that are there with what's actually going on for the end users.
You also talk about AI to AI communication and negotiation. What are the current challenges or breakthroughs in getting agents to cooperate efficiently?
Yeah, I think it's not standards in communications. We can obviously use MCP servers and agent-to-agent communication. And I'm kind of getting bored with that whole thing. And they're just talking. We're just creating a single channel for them to communicate. But it would be the ability to have a negotiation protocols in terms of how they're going to communicate. That's a bit more of a problem. So communication is not a problem. If I have a network, I can communicate agent to agent. But the ability to negotiate certain decisions and the ability to collaborate on decisions between two or more agents is something that I think is a problem. We don't know standard way to do that. We don't know, frameworks to set them up. Every developer is going to set them up differently. I would set them up differently than if I developed than you would. And that becomes an issue because suddenly if everybody's not on the same channel in terms of how negotiations are going to occur and how data is going to be stored and dealt with when intra-agent, then they're not very useful because I can't talk to your agents that you build because we didn't closely collaborate on it. You can't talk to my agents. And, people will say, well, we're all running MCP. It doesn't matter. That's just a communication mechanism and the ability to set up a service that does something consistent, we're able to use over and over again. But as far as the deeper negotiations in terms of how it embeds in the decision frameworks of each of the agent, that's something we haven't figured out yet as a commonality yet. I think that's the next step. I think in 2026, 2027, we're going to be talking about inter-agent negotiations, inter-agent processing, and the ability to get to the same channel and how these damn things communicate one to another and add value.
David's come up with another question.
Oh, cool.
Which is, so how are your agentic AI tasks orchestrated, centrally managed or distributed across services, which I know is part of your course as well?
Yeah, and David, you are a great straight man. Excellent questions. The reality is when you do an agentic architecture, you can set them up both ways. In other words, I can set them up where they are peer-to-peer relationship, where everybody has, in essence, the same rank and function. They're able to communicate one to another, just like you would peers in an organization without a leader, and then can collaborate on decisions, things like that. And obviously, there has to be consensus reached. If no agent has more power over the other, there has to be a certain amount of negotiation that occurs between those agents to carry things out. Sometimes a better way to do it would use kind of an autocratic relationships. In other words, I have a central control agent, which is the boss of other 100 agents that exist in the multi-agent system, and they're able to coordinate. It's able to coordinate and carry out certain activities, including orchestration. So if orchestration is occurring in a peer-to-peer relationship, I have to come to a consensus on what we're orchestrating and how to carry something out, and have to come to a sync in terms of priorities, who's going to do what first and how it's going to be carried out, how that's going to be passed on to other agents, things like that. Fortunately, agents are computers, and so they can figure this out in a couple of seconds. It doesn't take, like if we try to do it as humans, it's going to take a couple of months of meetings, but they're able to carry it out. But an easier, more consistent architecture in many cases is going to be centralized control, where you have a single agent that's going to be master relationship of the other agents and is able to control them and carry things out. And the agents will, in essence, act as subordinates. In other words, they're always going to defer to the command agent, whatever you want to call it. I've heard everything in the world call that thing. And it's going to orchestrate and carry things out. It's going to define the sequence. It's going to find who's doing what, when, how, at what time. And if you're architecting these things, that's a bit of an easier way to do it. When I teach Agentic AI in my generative AI class, I always tell them, do that first, carry that out. Once you get very good at that, then you can go to the peer-to-peer relationships, because those are going to be more complex. You can even get more complex out of that. You can go to multiple peers and different agent clusters that have different roles and responsibilities, and you can go nuts in terms of the number of agents and the granularity and how you're able to define them.
We've also had a question from Charles Lane, who says, what benefits, if any, would implementing agentic AI would have for workflows that are deterministic and therefore can be automated with or without AI reasoning? I think that is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the reality is very little benefit. And I think that's the reality of agentic that I think people aren't looking at right now, is that they're not going to be applicable, each and every business case out there. And what Charles just brought up, if someone came to me, a client came to me, and they were we're looking at agentic AI to solve this problem that he's defining here, I would say it's probably not needed. If you want to use AI, you can use monolithic generative AI systems, even embed that in an LLM. It's going to work perfectly fine. That'll take you a month to develop. The agentic system is going to take you 6 months. One thing's going to take you $500,000. The agentic system is going to take you 10, but you're going to end up with the same problems being solved.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Every new AI wave brings ethical concerns. What do you see as the most pressing ethical and societal implications of agentic AI?
I think the ethical crisis we're going through right now is to stop having the CEOs threatening their employees as being replaced with AI, when there's no ability for them to do that. And I think that has huge amounts of ethical concerns to me, because I think that's a hostile work environment, and I think that's not that's a toxic work environment. And so stop overestimating the reach and the power of these things to replace humans, because humans have a certain role and responsibilities. AI is going to be able to automate tasks. I use it all the time. It's a great productivity tool, but it can't automate creativity. It can't automate innovation, which is why we exist as humans. And the why you hire an employee, because they can figure out how to use AI as a force multiplier and put it to different purposes. So I think we see a mass of organizations out there right now that are overestimating what AI can do. They're firing people, telling people that AI is what, in the reality is they overhired. They did something else dopey. That's why they had to do it. And I think that's not necessarily bringing the human up to humans how they should be regarded. In other words, you should consider humans as the number one priority in building these systems. And I think that's the ethical challenge right now. Now people look at them as a cost center in many cases, and I think that's unethically bad. The other thing you have to think about is, what these agents could eventually, end up figuring out. So if we're, I hear people were looking to assign, hundreds of agents to us personally that are going to monitor activity, look at our behaviors, and figure out how to sell us stuff better and figure out better consumptions and things like that. And there's some sort of a reason why we're going to use it. In many cases, you're giving up complete privacy in those instances, more so than what we do on web browsers and things like that, which can be rather scandalous. But that is basically revealing everything, including your behavior, your health, everything that you don't want people to know. And I think once that information is abstracted, it's a fairly dangerous thing. So I think ethically, it's not a good idea to start gathering this ultra personal information that these organizations are starting to do right now.
And finally, what advice would you give to leaders about future-proofing their skills and in an organization in this agentic AI-driven world?
Yeah, splurge on training. I think that's something that organizations aren't doing out there now. They say, why should I buy AI intelligence why should I build intelligence with my humans if the AI is going to provide the intelligence? We have a talent shortage out there now. The amount of demand in terms of what talent we need to build and deploy these systems is off the scale. And the ability to supply it with human beings that understand what they're doing is hugely lacking right now. And we're seeing that with the fact, MIT just came out with a study a couple of weeks back at 95% of AI projects fail. If you do a triage on any of those projects, and I do them every week, I audit projects for a living, you get down to what happened, and it was poor decisions made by poor training. I talk to people, why did you do that? And they go, I didn't know any better. And no one taught me any better. I wasn't trained. I had to figure this out by reading a book or watching YouTube videos, which is fine. But there needs to be some sort of a structured understanding in terms of how we're approaching these problems. There's a very few elite, hundreds of people, not thousands of people or millions of people out there that know what they're doing. We need to expand that to millions of people.
David, thank you so much for coming on and talking about agentic AI. It's been fascinating. And I do recommend your course on that. There's been a couple of actually courses mentioned in the chat as well. David, where can people find you?
Well, check me out on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me. Also, my YouTube channels that I mentioned earlier, Cloud Computing Insider, and David's Not AI, something I started a couple of months ago, which is basically talking like we're talking now, looking at AI as both a skeptic and an admirer. And also check out my book, Cloud Computing Insider, and I just had a book drop yesterday on cloud computing governance. So check that out.
David, thank you so much for coming on and spending the time with us and sharing your expertise.